And a big welcome to our live audience for Digital Health Investor Talk. I'm your host, Stephen Wardell. I'm the managing partner of Wardell Advisors, a digital health advisory firm, and the author of The Future of Digital Health. Wardell Advisors is helping digital health companies address issues around growth, fundraising, trade sales, and strategic alternatives, giving you more options in today's challenging environment. You can follow me on x.com/Stephen Wardell. Our show today is on the topic, The Consolidation Wave is Coming. And our guest today is Ari Tulla. Ari is the founder and CEO of Elo Health, an AI personalization engine delivering the exact nutrients to live better. Before Elo, Ari founded Better Doctor, a doctor finder engine, and was the CEO of Quest Analytics. Ari is also an active angel investor focused on health and human performance. You can follow him on LinkedIn at Ari Tulla. This show is being recorded and will be included in my podcast series called Digital Health Investor Talk. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. We always love getting 5-star reviews. We have new podcast links for our show, so make sure that you see recent episodes when you subscribe, or you could be subscribing to the old page. This is not investment advice, and we are not investment advisors. Here's the format of today's show. It's about 90 minutes, and Ari and I will spend the first part talking about the news and the macro picture and other topics, and then we'll focus on our special topic of the day. So Ari, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, thank you, Stephen. Really great to be here. My name is Ari, like you said already. I'm from Finland, been in the Bay Area now for almost 20 years, and the last 15 years I've been focused on building companies in healthcare. I have a pretty deep understanding of the area of how do we access healthcare. Spent about a decade in that. And now for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been spending in the world of nutrition. How do we help people eat better, get the right nutrition? And my background before that is in tech. So I spent about almost a decade in the world of video games. And I've been a tiny investor for quite a few companies over the last 15 years. So I'm not really an investor, I'm just a hobbyist. But I have some point of view after, working and putting money into, 65 companies in this space.
That's great. Thank you. So let's see. Now moving on to news topics. I guess we'll start with the election, actually. So last night there was an election. As of this morning, it looks like Trump won for president, and also the Republicans will have the House and the Senate as well. So markets were up on the news. The NASDAQ was up 2.8% to 19,000 on the election news. And interestingly, the Fed is meeting today and tomorrow, and the market would like to see further cuts, but the Fed is going to weigh things. And it was aggressive the last meeting in cutting 50 basis points. And so we'll see. Probably we'll get the news tomorrow, but the innovation economy would like to see further cuts. I think we're in the mid fours right now. The innovation economy would like to see a series of steady cuts to get us down, to get the federal funds rate down, below 4%, below 3% over time. Ari, any thoughts just on the market reaction?
Not very surprising. I think people had a relatively likely prediction that Trump might win. I think it was around 70-80% before election. So of course there's a bit of movement today. And I think one thing that I think many of people saw is that the Bitcoin hit all-time high yesterday, hit another all-time high today. So that's, I think, evident on that people are expecting less regulation or maybe clarity on what to do with the new things like crypto. And also I think many of the AI companies have taken a bit of a bump today. So that also, I think, means that we might have less regulation. And I think there's this impact that we don't really know much about. And I mean, there's a lot to be learned here. But the fact that, you saw yesterday Elon Musk to be together with Trump before the announcement, and they were sitting together. So that's, of course, an interesting thing that, many people are looking and asking what it means.
Yeah, and dwelling for a moment on the story of crypto, I think that the U.S. has always had at least two different varying points of view on crypto. One is that the U.S. would love to be a global leader in fintech and make America a warm place for fintech companies. The other is that America happens to have the global currency, which is enormously advantageous to the US. So the US government gets to print billions of dollars to fight COVID. And if they have to, they can just debase the currency a little bit, print dollars, and other countries can't do that. And they can have that extra money to spend. And so Bitcoin, being pro-Bitcoin as a government, is consistent with the first goal of having the US be a leader in fintech. But Bitcoin is a threat to America's ability to have the sort of the national reserve currency, and other people are stuck on the dollar, would have great difficulty leaving the dollar. And Bitcoin is literally a threat to that, because people can go to Bitcoin and not face debasement of their currency. And so it looked like Biden didn't speak much about this topic at all, but it wound up being negative on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And Trump, late in the game, late in the campaign, came out strongly in favor of Bitcoin and other currencies. So there's different reasons that the government might take one, the US government especially, matters a lot in this case, and might be on one side or the other. And now you have the side that is favoring. And so you might see institutions move more into certain cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, most especially, but also other ones, because they feel like there's going to be a normalized place for it among asset classes. So that's interesting. Yeah, so when it comes to Trump winning, what could that mean for healthcare? So I think there's a couple interesting things. One is that there is a once-in-a-lifetime healthcare reform that started in 2009 and is still going, and is the movement to fee for value. And it started with Barack Obama. And then it kind of paused with Trump. And then Biden did not push hard to restore what Obama had been doing. And so you have this situation where the way healthcare is paid for has shifted somewhat from fee-for-service, the old model, to fee-for-value, the new model, but not entirely. And then Trump stopped it, and he stopped it. People thought largely this was at the behest of doctors. The doctors in the political process didn't like the shift to fee-for-value. They claimed that it hurt the doctor-patient relationship. There was a doctor in Congress who became the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tom Price, and he stopped it. He personally stopped the movement to fee-for-value. And then what I heard was that Biden, at the start of his first term, he was told, you only get to do three big things in your first term presidency. And so he chose to do three big things, and there was a pandemic going on. He did not choose to make one of his three big priorities to be restarting the push to fee for value. So now that Trump is elected, he hasn't said anything, but this could mean stasis. It means that we don't pick up the reform of shifting healthcare from fee for service to fee for value. So, any thoughts on that's one possible meaning of a Trump election?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think just taking a step back, coming from Europe, and happen to remember, vaguely at least, the last time we had big inflation in Europe in the 90s and 2000s. So, I mean, then many countries had been in euro, and it is really tough now if you are a small country in euro where you can't print money, you can't devalue your currency. So that's why in Europe you are hearing a lot of grumbling now from the southern members who are really having hard time getting there's no way to get your economy in check and balance this easily, because you can't do any of this place. And in the US we can do much more flexibility. And I think one other point on the whole ACA piece, that of course there's a big mandate, I think, from the people that something needs to be done. I don't think people understand what killing an ACA would mean. I don't think we have any idea. Even I don't know. I've been following this for 15 years and I have no idea. Like, I don't think we can replace it, or what would we replace it with. But the challenge is that in US, we've been going more and more every day in the direction of government-paid healthcare. You think the ACA, you think about the VA, Medicare, and so forth. We're getting to 50%. And then you go to other countries like England, you go to Germany, and they've been going other way around. They've been becoming more privatized. So it's almost 50-50 there as well. So we are almost even now in Europe and in the US. And we often talk about in a political campaigns like it's a government mandated healthcare or it's a free healthcare. Free, I mean healthcare being, you pick what you pick. But that's really not the case at all. They are almost the same today. So that has always been interesting to me when I work with companies in Europe and work with companies in US. And I have to explain this to every time to people, like, these are not that different markets. They just look different from the outset, but they are not really in the end. They're almost identical. So I think, the fee-for-service piece is something that, it's hard to believe that, this mandate that, I think people have given Trump now, that this would be very high on the list. I think there are many other things that I think are higher up on the list. So I think we don't really know, but I think the next topic we can talk about is more like what about the plans? Like, what are the healthcare plans? And we all have heard about lately, I think that Robert Kennedy Jr. would be the person who will take the reign for healthcare. Of course, we don't know yet, but that's been, I think, interesting discussion that we could have maybe.
Yeah, and so and why don't we move on to RFK? So there were a couple of things. So first, there was a news story that said that the CEOs of 5 of the biggest pharma companies in the world today got on the phone together with their lobbyists and lawyers to say, what does this mean? And also RFK put out a statement, and his statement was I would call it a very moderate statement compared to what he said in the past. And his statement, was about vaccines. Of course, he could speak to 10 issues, but on the vaccine issue, he said that there's not enough choice in informed choice about vaccines. So in the future, he'd like there to be more informed and more choice. So people could opt out, and there's more information for them to make their decision based on. And next is he wanted more proof of vaccines before approval. So vaccines actually have a lower standard of proof. The classic golden standard of proof for 60 years has been 2 phase 2 clinical trials, basically, to show that it's safe and effective. But vaccines don't have to meet that standard. So he spoke of a higher standard to prove whether they're risky or not before approval. And then third, he pointed to government industry conflicts of interest. So he's claiming that there are some conflicts of interest there, and he wants to end conflicts of interest. And so to me, this sounds like evolution, not revolution. And vaccines are a tough case because for a couple of reasons. One is that it turns out that vaccines are a terrible product that's not made by industry unless they have special treatment compared to drugs. And so without the current system, you would have underproduction of vaccines. And then, so the current system includes, the government subsidizing vaccines, giving them a favorable regulatory climate, and giving them a favorable liability climate as well. And that's because the government has an agenda that's not a commercial agenda. They would like there to be vaccines for every major disease, and the commercial market would not support that well, for example. RFK may have some interesting reforms proposals that are evolution, not revolution, but they may cause problems that the existing regulations were set up to address in the first place. So we'll see. But that's an interesting development on the RFK front, and I've heard he was mentioned as possible Secretary of Health and Human Services, which would be the top agency covering FDA and NIH and others. So, any other thoughts on RFK as part of Trump administration? Any other thoughts on RFK?
Yeah, I think one point on the vaccine policy, and I'm not an expert. I sit in a board of primary health that is doing the vaccinations for many states and was one of the key players in the COVID testing and vaccination. Millions of people were tested and vaccinated. And of course, today we work in the world of public health. And I think vaccines are a difficult thing, because if you make it less prevalent, then we will have illnesses that have not been around will come back. And we are seeing that in certain areas. Like I live in San Francisco, and in Marin County, for example, there are certain cases of illness that has not been around for a long time, have been popping up. Same happens in the OC in Orange County in California, in a few places. So that is a kind of problematic thing, because if we eradicated an illness like polio that killed millions of people, if it comes back, it's not very smart. But I'm not taking any say on the COVID vaccines, whatnot. That's a topic that let other people litigate that. But then you have, of course, other points that Kennedy specifically has been talking about. One is the investigating increase of chronic illness in children, and that goes anything from like type 2 diabetes now happening in children, obesity, and autism and other things. Interesting question, what happens there. And then also nutrition and environmental health. My company today works in an idea of we try to turn food into medicine, and I'm not saying that you should take food instead of medicine. I'm saying that they should be combined together. And I think Kenneth has talked about having more education in medical school about other alternative treatments like exercise, sleep, nutrition that are not today in curriculum. So that is maybe one interesting topic. And then I think from the Trump perspective, I think there's a lot of cut regulation type of goals, I think, and even cut the size of the government. If you think about what they've been now talking quite openly, or the Trump acolytes are talking quite openly in different podcasts. And I think the prescription drug pricing is the one thing that was already talked about before, and the importing from Canada and elsewhere. Those are the topics that at least I see when I look at the policy dialogue today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll tell you two kind of funny stories about these topics. One was that this was a news story from over 10 years ago, and it was that well-off upper middle class moms in the San Francisco Bay Area, who were kind of hippie moms, they didn't like the whooping cough vaccine, and so they got together and they decided that they didn't like the whooping cough vaccine, and so they started sort of boycotting whooping. Now, whooping cough for a kid it's like the flu, but it's much worse than any flu you've seen. It's just much worse than the flu, and you can run into very serious problems of inflammation and difficulty breathing even from it. And within 2 years, sure enough, their kids were getting whooping cough. And so this can come roaring back in the most modern city in the world. And the other story, this story dates from the 1990s. Even in the 1990s, people were asking questions like, why does it seem like the French live longer and don't get obesity, but Americans do? And so there was a delegation from Boston of distinguished scientists and doctors, and they took a trip to France, and they rapidly concluded that one of the biggest factors was portion size.
Yeah.
So you can be very sophisticated, and you can ask, is there something about the bread? Is there something about the Mediterranean diet? Is there something about the wine? Or you can just notice, hey, everywhere we go, the portions are smaller in France. But I think it's meritorious to try to look into, why do we have chronic illnesses? And it makes sense that we have chronic illnesses because we live our lives a certain way every day. And that is the output of that system, is to have a chronic illness, to have inflammation or obesity or lack of sleep or something. And so what is it? And humans are very varied. And so usually one answer is not enough, or the answer is very hard to implement in our society or something. And so understanding, there's room for understanding that better.
And I mean, I personally, I've spent a lot of my time over the last years in the area of understanding more why we are sick as a nation today. and trying to even build a company around that. And I think we have a problem because we all know we are almost 80% of us are overweight, and 40% are obese. So those are real numbers that are making a big issue in everyday health of human beings.
That's great. And then another interesting element is that Elon Musk, as part of his campaigning for Trump, he said that he thought we could cut. He said that regulations and size of government are strangulating private industry, and he thought we could cut significantly the size of government. And he threw out a number which was $2 trillion. So if federal spending is several trillion dollars, I forget how much it is, 7, 8, 9 trillion. He's talking about cutting less than half, but 2 trillion off of that. And he pointed to examples. I think one example was that as part of rocket launches, he dumps a lot of water, city water, from literally where his rocket is standing. I think it has to do with that when the rocket ship takes off, its fiery engines are blasting the ground. And so he dumps a lot of water at the same time. And so those engines are blasting the water, and it saves the ground. And he wound up getting a blockage and a fine for dumping water, which he didn't, without a permit, which he didn't need a permit, which he didn't know he needed a permit for. And he pointed out that it rains and has tropical storms in this area all the time, so water is always being dropped on the ground. But he was blocked and fined for dumping water on the ground as part of a space launch that he didn't have a permit for. So that was an example of regulations. So we don't know how this will apply to healthcare, but if it means cutting 2/7, most of this money goes to people. So this could mean cutting 2/7 of the professionals involved in healthcare services, and also cutting regulations as well. There's also so federal bodies have authority to make regulations, and Congress has the authority to pass laws. And it's often been pointed out that Congress gets a lot of credit itself for passing new laws, but never spends time or gets credit for repealing old laws. So you just have one law stacked on another, stacked on another. So we may see regulatory bodies have a month when they only cut back regulations, or you may see Congress have a month enforced by the Speaker of the House or something, where they can only bring forward legislation to end laws rather than to have a stack of new laws, for example. So structurally, the system seems built to make it easy to add a new set of laws on top of the old laws, but structurally, it doesn't get the time and the actors don't get the credit if they repeal old laws. So we may see that cutting of budget, cutting of staffs, and reduction of regulations coming out of this as well. And I think healthcare is an especially difficult area to do this in, because you need to have consensus around a vision before you begin, or else you could really mess things up. And so they may go after simpler areas. They may cut other areas first before they do healthcare. So, and the other thought. So then there's also, we've seen pressure on pharma drug prices. Pharma drug prices drive an enormous amount of innovation all around the world. The margins on new pharma drugs have come down, except in the US, where they remain high. And now you have the Inflation Reduction Act, which had provisions that allows the government to negotiate prices down more than it could before. That is hurting pharma in the pocketbook. And so, have you heard any indications we might see further movements under Trump to cut the price of on-patent prescription drugs, do you think, Ari?
Well, I think today we have a few areas that we are seeing a real challenge, and one of them is, I think, Ozempic and GLP-1 drugs. That we know that some payers are almost running out of money because of the expense, and we have such a prevalence today. 15 million people are taking the drugs, and I think this will be a very interesting discussion now. What will happen with the compounding? I think there was a feeling, I think maybe a few months ago, where most people I talked to, they said that the compounding will be banned. And I mean, of course, Novo Nordisk is telling FDA right now, very, with a megaphone that, let's just stop that, and it's dangerous. And I think that will be interesting to see what happens with that. Is it because the price is, between $1,400 and $200 or $1,500, like $150? So it's a 10x difference on the price of the drug, and in principle they could be about the same. Of course, you don't get the pen that you get with Ozempic if you buy compounded, but in theory it could be almost the same. So that is, I think, a very interesting topic that will have a big impact, and I think there will be a few other ones, like the insulin is of course one that's been debated already by both parties, and maybe there are a few other ones, like really big drugs that they can kind of iron out one by one. But I don't know how to do it in a more broadly, because of course there's a big long tail. We have thousands of drugs that we are serving to people, and it's tough to go those one by one.
Great. Well, thank you. So any other thoughts on what Trump would mean for the healthcare industry?
I think the last bit, I'm curious myself, because there's a lot of talk about now, how do we deploy AI into healthcare? And I believe at least that AI is almost most prominently usable today, the LLMs in healthcare, because we have a lot of people doing people things, and some of those things could be done more effectively at a much lower cost by AIs. And today we have, actually, if you want to build an algorithm and get the FDA approval, it's not that difficult to do. Most people don't know about it, but it's actually not that hard. So we have a pretty good system to get approved. But I think that might be a very interesting area that, I believe, it's my opinion, but I believe that in the next 4 years, we're going to see a massive prevalence of AI coming into our lives in every possible way. And if at the same time we are cutting regulation, like you said, in a new way, or not setting new regulation, we might see a real Cambrian evolution, expansion of new things happening. And at the same time, we know that they are doing a lot of regulation in EU, and they want to do. China is, of course, a very different market. It's not open market. So this could be the most interesting time in business and innovation history of the world, if we have no regulation and we have this AI becoming maybe almost sentient in the next 5 years.
That's really interesting. And so I've heard a couple of things along these lines. And so one is that today, the kind of person we want to become a doctor is the kind of person who could memorize 5 large medical textbooks. That's the kind of person we want. And that, if you think of when you were in high school, how many people in your high school class would want to have to memorize 5 medical school textbooks, and how many could do it? But that's who we want. It's naturally very restrictive of who goes into medicine. But increasingly, you don't need that. First of all, you can't keep up with the amount of literature that's published. No one can keep up. And second of all the data is now in the database, in the EMR database. And so you can pull it out and it can do all of the work you need to know for you. You can calculate the amount of drug you need to use. It can show you decision tree. It can help you diagnose. It can do, and you don't have to be as expert as it helps you diagnose. And so people have talked about how there's going to be a kind of a bifurcation of doctors, and the first kind of doctor is the coach. So now your doctor is not someone who can memorize 5 medical school textbooks. It's someone who would be a wonderful coach. You've just been diagnosed with cancer. You can probably beat it, but it's going to be a tough journey, and it's mentally, it's an awful thing to go home with, and it's going to be a tough journey. But I'm your coach, and I'm going to help you, and I've done this before, and I'll walk you through, and there's a complex healthcare system, and I'll be helping guide you through that healthcare system. And there's pretty good outcomes for this kind of cancer, but I'll be there with you. So that's a different kind of person with different kind of training. And the joke is that that's the kind of person who in the past would have gone to film school, but is now, with the help of AI, could be your doctor. And so that's one kind of story that I've heard. And then the other kind of doctor will be the hyperproductive doctor. So this is going to be a doctor who's going to do 10 visits per hour because because all the systems are in front of them and they just rapidly go, and their doctors make decisions and take responsibility is what is the role of doctors. And so we want a human to do it because we want a human who's an impressive human who knows us to take responsibility. And then but this doctor, he or she can rapidly make decisions. So there's the super doc and there's the coach doc is where this is leading.
I think I love the example because having spent 10 years of my life in the access to care and having been involved pairing millions and millions and millions of people with the doctor, and our tagline at Better Doctor was find a doctor you love. And of course, it depends. If you want to have a doctor, your PCP, primary care doctor, you want to have somebody who can be your coach, who can be your trusted person long term, who will tell you, maybe guide you to the right thing. But if you have the cancer, you want to have the surgeon who played video games to learn to be very nimble, and they are steely nerves and they can go in, and you don't need to have the sweet talker. You need to have the one who can execute and get the right thing done. And then you walk away being healed. But then you need to go back to the coach in a way. And I always love the example. I think it was Jack Nicklaus or somebody, a great golfer. I think his coach at one point was a person who had never played golf. And he was one of the best coaches in the world for golf. So he said that, you are the best in the world already. You don't need to have the best person in the world or better person to coach you. You need to have somebody who can make you even better at what you do because you're already the best in the world. And that is a talent that I don't think many doctors have today. How to be a great coach who can get, Steve, how do we get more out of you? How do we make you better? It's not about telling you what to do. It's about finding the greatness in you.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you. So, and then when it comes to AI in healthcare, I've also heard the joke I'm hearing is that there's an arms race of AI in healthcare, mostly on the administrative side today, not on the clinical side today. And hospitals are buying AI systems to bill better, and then payers are buying AI systems to block better billing. And there's an arms race going on. And the joke I heard is that in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Terminator, the Air Force builds a supercomputer, which then wakes up and then decides that it's going to destroy humanity. So now that AI is here, what I'm hearing is that that movie was directionally correct, but it's actually going to be a hospital billing system that wakes up and decides to destroy humanity, not an Air Force supercomputer. And then also, an interesting move here was that we brought up Elon Musk a couple times. It's often forgotten he's a co-founder of OpenAI, and then Sam Altman ran with it, and then Elon Musk said, "Hey, I don't like what you're doing with it," but Musk couldn't do anything about that, and so Musk jokes that OpenAI is sort of closed and for profit. And that's the opposite of what it was intended to be. So then Musk turned around and bought a whole bunch of GPS or GPU servers from NVIDIA and started Grok X AI and makes that available on the X platform. And it's known for, he's trying to have it be like OpenAI. He claims that it's more even-handed, doesn't include political censorship in it. It does include Twitter data, which no other platform includes, although Facebook's could include Facebook data. And he recently asked people to try it in healthcare scenarios, and upload their medical records. And this turned out to be controversial. So he spoke of people uploading their medical records, including imaging medical records, which my past understanding was that imaging is a totally different kind of AI. It's computer vision AI. It's not large language model AI. But maybe Grok is both. I don't know. Maybe it's multimodal and both. And so doctors were doing this and were getting mixed reviews. Some said, "Oh, it's very insightful," and others said, "Oh, it missed something." And Musk isn't claiming that it's perfect. He's saying it'll get better. And I'm noticing, though, that Musk doesn't have a source of medical images that we know of. He isn't getting all the medical images from a cancer center in Los Angeles or something. And so he's actually doing crowdsourcing medical images. But people have raised privacy concerns, accuracy concerns around this, that sort of thing. So we keep seeing AI advancing and being involved in these kinds of areas.
Yeah, and I think we just need to understand what the LLMs are. I mean, they are systems trained with as much human data that you can collect. Could be books, could be internet, dialogue. It could be even all the emails of the world by Google that Gmail has. And then you train it, and then it starts to understand the world, but it doesn't know why is it doing it, and it's really problematic in a way. And I don't think the LLM itself will become the sentient AI. But today, you can take a photo of a food, for example, any meal you have, and you can send it to ChatGPT and ask what is in this food. It will roughly know the calorie content, the macronutrients, and stuff like that, based on a photo. And that works already, and it's unbelievably cool. I've been working on computer vision for more than 20 years in different capacities, and the fact that it works today is almost unbelievable. It was not even close to where we are today, just 3 years ago. And this is the things that we're going to see now happening in the next coming years. We're going to be combining the image understanding, the reasoning that you can see now in the new OpenAI model, for example, and then also the basic LLM. And of course, you have Perplexity, and also OpenAI have now a search tool where you can kind of search like Google, but it will give you more like a summary answer that you care about. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in healthcare, because healthcare by default is very ineffective. We spend still, better, but is it like 17 cents a dollar on admin? And we don't do that in many other fields of life anymore.
Interesting, thanks. So now moving on to just some other topics. So I think I'll touch on the idea of the IPO environment. So we are in a risk-off environment now in private markets and public markets with the IPO window closed. And that's been bad news. It's been true for 2 years. It's been true since the Fed started raising rates 2 years ago. Now rates are coming down. People are wondering, will we see the IPO window open? Well, there's a couple things going on. The first is that, in general, digital health companies are trading that are already public are trading at low multiples. And so that means that they are comps for future IPOs, for unicorns to IPO, and they're bad comps for them. So that's bad news. But market indices are at record highs. So digital health companies, many of which IPO'd in the last, call it 5-6 years, are not really participating in this lift of the stock market. Much of that lift is being driven by the Magnificent Nine or whatever it is, the big tech and AI companies. And so digital health has not participated in that. One positive standout story is actually Him and Hers, which is the telehealth pharmacy company that figured out an interesting niche. That's also, it's direct-to-consumer pharmacy. So this is not your normal digital health company. And it's doing well based on having found good niches for products. A doctor would love a patient to come in and say, do I have erectile dysfunction? Can I get a drug from you? It turns out patients don't want to have that conversation with their doctor. Hims and Hers is right there. I don't know whether they do home testing. They probably, but doctors would love you to say, I think I have an STD. Can I get tested? It turns out patients don't want to go. They don't want to wait. They don't want to schedule the appointment. They don't want to have the face-to-face conversation with their doctor. So doctors are missing out on important stuff here. And Hims and Hers has been doing well. And recently it saw some further lift because they announced that they will release a generic version of a GLP-1 drug on their platform next year. So that's interesting. And there's been limited good performance. Now, what we're hearing is basically, the stock market's at record highs, and what needs to happen is a high-quality tech company or a high-quality healthcare company needs to go public. And we'll probably see this. We will probably see this in November, December, January, February. They need to go public. That needs to be well received by investors in the aftermarket. and then stock price needs to go up and stay up. And if that happens, then many unicorns, tech unicorns, digital health unicorns, will try to go out in the wake of that. And so we're looking for that signal, and that will help many things. It'll help young companies get venture investments because venture investors can see that these companies can go public. It'll help venture investors harvest returns, give them to LPs, and then LPs invest in new funds. So we have a shot. We'll be following carefully what's going to happen in November, December, January, February. But I think we'll see some people try to go out, some high quality companies try to go out, and then digital health companies will follow after that. And it was in the news that Omada and Hinge filed S1s. So there's a chance to go, if you want to see what digital health companies that have been around for 10 plus years look like in terms of the financials, these are good companies to look at. And then PitchBook put out discussion of, they think that ZocDoc, Ro, Color, Everly, Noom, Lyra, Devoted, Somatus are unicorns that they think are likely to want to IPO. So it's always fun playing the IPO game. And what the sector needs is for some great companies to go public and have their stock go up and be good comps. And then we'll see similar companies get private investment and public investment. Any thoughts on just the fundraising environment or the IPO environment or valuations?
Yeah, so I was my previous company is part of a bigger company that I run that is now kind of in that waiting pattern, and we are too small to IPO. We are profitable. We're doing quite well, and my current company is in a AAB round fundraising moment. So of course I'm living this in two ways right now, and it's interesting to look at it. And I talked to a good friend of mine who runs one of the hottest unicorns today in the country in AI space. And he schooled me about this because, we had this understanding in, 2017, 18, 19 that, we can go public when we are hitting like 150 million, 200 million revenue run rate. And today the number is 500 million. So there's no point of going public if you're under $500 million today, because you're going to be a penny stock. And we know what happened to the penny stocks. They are valued today 80, 90, 95% lower than they did IPO or SPAC in the last few years. And like you said, there have been around 30, 35 IPOs and SPACs in this space in the last 5 years or so. And they are all under water except, I think, the Hims and Hers. And then Tempus AI, that, by the way, just went up today again greatly. So they are up now 40% from the IPO price. And then I think the one company that I got to know well in the past is Doximity. And they are almost they went up and then they went down. But that's been, it's a great company. I mean, look at the numbers. I mean, it's quite small niche, but they have a really good business overall. So the challenge is that you have to be big enough. And I think many of the companies you listed, I think many of them are big enough. Not all of them are profitable. So you probably almost need to be close to or profitable as well when you go public. And of course, you want to get the growth rate to be decent. And some of these companies, they don't really grow that fast anymore. So where's the growth going to be? And I think it is really tough market today. So if we think about 30, 35 IPOs that happened at the same time in the last, let's say 2019 and 21, we had about 1,300 companies who were funded, and we funded $68 billion of capital in these companies. And I think in 21 we funded half of that, 29 billion. That was, by the way, 3 or 4 times more than we had funded ever before. So we had this 1 year when we just put too much money out there, and we built too many companies. And now we have 8 companies doing musculoskeletal. We have 8 companies or 15 companies doing diabetes, and I don't think we need that many. So now we're going to have this some sort of a condensation happening that we need to have a lesser number. And either what needs to happen is that we need to be able to merge companies together, companies need to go under, companies to be acquired. And I think it is really telling to me that recently, I think you all heard it, that the General Catalyst, they raised another $8 billion. I mean, they, of course, I think they're the best healthcare investor today. And Hemant, of course, has been, I mean, he's great. I mean, he's brilliant. And he has done really, really great work on this for a long time. But what they did is that they allocated 2 billion of the aid into PE type of transactions. And I think, I mean, I talked with them a little bit, but, they're going to probably use that in a way that they're going to buy companies and merge companies to their existing portfolio companies that are out there in the market, and many of them are running on fumes today, and they're not profitable. But you could maybe acquire them at 15 cents a dollar, and then you can build this sort of bigger company, and then put maybe $100-200 million more funding into it, and then that could be the way to get to the $500 million and profitability, because we need more scale to be able to sell to the employers, sell to the payers, and also the systems.
Really interesting. Thank you. And so now I'm going to skip some sections here that we usually cover just for time reasons. And then so this is a section our audience loves. Is there a technology that has improved your life that you want to tell our audience about? So I'm going to mention this little thing right here, which I would call this an advanced charger. This happens to be made by Anker. They're Anker. They're a really good maker of one. And it happens to, on one end, it plugs into the wall. On the other end, it has 2 USB-C and 1 USB-A. And this device can replace your laptop charger and your phone charger and other charger, your headphone charger. And it's very intelligent. So it will ask the question, how much power does the laptop need? And it will serve up enough power to the laptop. It'll ask, how much power does the phone need? And it'll serve up that power. And it'll change the power over time, and it'll charge your phone fast without damaging the battery. So that the charging technology has just come along, and so much that you can get a device where it's smaller than my laptop's charger. And most laptops can be charged by USB-C or Thunderbolt, which is the same thing these days. But it's smaller than my main charger, but it charges everything. So that's what I'm bringing to the table, an Anker USB-C charger. This seems to be called GAN Prime is the name of this one. That's the tech that I'll mention. Do you have anything that you like and want to share with our audience?
If I can do two, I mean, one of my favorite things to do. I'm deep into the longevity thinking. I'm being called a biohacker for 15 years. I don't like the term, but maybe I am. But this is one of the pieces that I really like a lot. I mean, this is the Oura Ring, the new one that is been around for almost a decade, and now I think it's becoming the hottest thing for the Christmas. So you can have a ring in your hand that can track your sleep, activity, and also for women, your fertility and cycle tracking and so forth. I mean, it's a product that I've been wearing it now 8 years in my finger every night and every day, and it became my wedding ring. So I'm pretty, and I'm a early investor in the company, but it's been wonderful to have a company that started in my hometown in Finland, in a small town, and now they are selling millions of rings in the US today in the holiday season. So that's been really cool. And the other one is of course my product. These are things we built with our partners in the UK a couple of years ago. It's a 3D printed gummy vitamin. So what you can do with my company Elo, you can take a blood test, and you can then basically get the right nutrients printed into your gummy with your name on the top. And it's all customized to you out of 1 billion combinations. So instead of having 7 pills, you can have 1 gummy a day and get all your basic, vitamins, minerals. So that's been a convenient thing that a lot of people, around me do use and like.
That's really interesting. A while back, I had a dream of a product which was, so some people have in their kitchen or somewhere a bunch of supplements, and they open up one, take some, open up the next, take the next. And the individually wrapped pill situation where there's a piece of plastic wrapper and there's one pill in each pill pack did this. And so I thought, couldn't you choose to have 7 supplements and then they would be sent to you not in bottles, but they'd be sent to you in a pill pack, stream of pills, and you take them that way. It turns out that's much harder and more expensive to do than people thought. It's hard to mass distribute that. But your product, which puts everything in a gummy, sounds better. Just you have a single gummy instead of 7 pills in individual wrapping or 7 pills in bottles.
We can also do the wrappers. So we also have the pills coming. You can order pills as well, because some people like pills. So we do have the pills as well. But the gummy is much more convenient than nobody wants to swallow 8 pills. I mean, some people don't care, but most people don't really like that, so they prefer the gummies.
That's great. So then the next one I'll mention. So JP Morgan is coming up. So conferences. I still recommend that people raising money go to JP Morgan. Who can you expect to be at JP Morgan? Typically, you get at large companies, you get the CEO, CFO, head of investor relations, and head of corp dev. Go to JP Morgan. At small companies, you get the CEO, goes to JP Morgan. And at most venture funds, still go. JP Morgan is fading a little bit in terms of it being a digital health fundraising conference. It's still a good one, but it's expensive. The neighborhood of San Francisco is a disaster area that turns people off. It's a weird conference because you don't buy tickets from JP Morgan and you don't attend the JP Morgan conference. You just schedule your own meetings with people. And the health conference is in October, and it is seeking to kill the JP Morgan conference, at least in terms of digital health companies attending it. It's saying, come to health in October in Las Vegas, spend your budget at health, meet investors at health, and then you don't have to go to JP Morgan in January. But if you're raising money, I still recommend to companies to go to JP Morgan. So you should be thinking right now about attending, and you should get your invitations off for meetings before Thanksgiving, and you should be booking your flight and your hotel. And as I mentioned, you don't actually get invited by JP Morgan. You don't actually attend the JP Morgan conference in the Westin St. Francis. Instead, it's all about meetings. Try to get 8 meetings a day with investors, with potential partners. Just assume they're going, write them, and say, let's meet. So that's the JP Morgan conference. Any thoughts on JP Morgan or any other conference in the next couple of months that you want to call our audience's attention to?
Yeah, the JPM is something that as a local, it's very easy. I can take my bike and I'll be there in 10 minutes. So I've done it for the last 10 years. But you're right, I never bought a ticket, so I don't really know what happens behind the closed doors. And I think for me, the key is that there are a few websites that I don't know if you list them in your content, but that you can find all the side events. And there are maybe 100, 200 events that anyone can book and be early because they get full. But there are really great events where you can actually connect with people off the hours, even dinners and stuff like that. So that's kind of the main way I do the week. I spend, I do like 8 dinners a week, and then many breakfasts, and the work day I normally work or have meetings. So it's been very productive, and I think my company has sold Better Doctor. I mean, that was one place we initiated the early connections, so it can be very, very beneficial. I'm doing I'll be in East Coast this year, so I'm going to be at the Piper Sandler small conference in New York. But there's not much, I think, happening before the JPM after the health was a big deal. I mean, I was there, and I think it's a great conference in many ways, not only for meeting people, but also you can actually learn something there. And I think they run a really great tight ship. And we had a small booth also for Elo, and I think we met a few hundred people, and there were a couple of things that really will lead into something valuable.
And I'm actually going to be collecting a list of parties and publishing a list of parties. So for our audience, and Ari, I'll tie you into this as well. And my angle is it's for young digital health companies. What are the parties they should attend? So usually when you see these lists, you might see an event that is full of pharma executives that has nothing to do with software. Or you might see an event that's put on by an accounting firm, but it's not specialized for digital health. And so the theme of my list is going to be events that are sponsored by VCs that invest in young companies, in young digital health companies, or events sponsored by young digital health companies, or events that are the most relevant for executives of young digital health companies. So mine's going to be a specialized list. And so I invite our audience, anyone, to write me, and I'll connect you to the list, and write me with your picks. If you know of parties that typically take place on certain days, if you know that they are happening this year, or they typically take place on a Tuesday at JP Morgan, write me with that information, and I'll add that to the list.
And there was a really fun one, I think, last year that I don't know if they have done it before, but there was a biotech bike ride. There's a group who organize rides around the world, and that was on Sunday before. It starts on Monday and Sunday, but it was basically like a 5-6 hour ride with 50 people going out, and that's a great way to connect to people because you are going to hang out with them for half a day. And it was a pretty like a 100-kilometer ride, so not for the faint-hearted. But that will be probably organized again. If not, then I'll organize a ride and I'll send it to you so you can also post that. Happy to take people out on a beautiful terrain here in the Marin County.
That's great. And is that San Francisco and Marin and maybe other areas, or where does the ride go?
Yeah, but normally when you leave, it doesn't need to be that long. That was a bit extreme because some people almost died. I think they were so tired. I think they couldn't do anything the rest of the week. But you go up the Golden Gate Bridge and you get to Marin County. It's some of the best cycling in the world. Sometimes, you've been there many times in the JPM. The weather can be unpredictable in that time of year. It's the most wet week of the year in San Francisco. So sometimes it's rainy and stormy. So not the great time to go out. But last year it happened to be beautiful and something like 70 degrees.
That's great. So now we're moving on to our main topic. So, which is the consolidation wave is coming. We've lived through an unprecedented period of new digital health products and companies. Consolidation follows. And so you have a thesis. So having been an analyst on Wall Street covering the sector, I would say that since 2009, we had healthcare reform and we had the Fed begin the ZIRP policy, the zero interest rate policy, and we had massive entry of companies into the sector. And I would say that since then, the entire period since then, we have had under consolidation. We've had below expected consolidation. Consolidation is often when you have a shakeout and the least performing companies drop out, or when companies are bought. And we've had under consolidation, we've had under shakeout, and we've had under acquisition of companies. And so people are very concerned about this. They're saying, when will we start to see a normal industry consolidation happen? And now that interest rates are back up and companies are having trouble raising money, and there's some more mature companies at different stages, there's a thought that maybe we'll start to see, after years of under consolidation, we will start to see normal consolidation levels or even high consolidation levels. So I think you have some thoughts about this. Can you go into what you think about future consolidation?
Yeah, I think I already briefly mentioned the fact that we have just in between 19 and 21, we had 1,300 new companies funded, and some of them funded pretty heavily, like we talk about 20, 30, $40 million in AB rounds. And now we just have a big portion. You know better the exact number, but let's say at least 2,500 companies. And many of them haven't raised money for the last year and a half or even 2 years, because the 21 was such a big boon and people raised a big round, and now they've been able to justify the burn rate down. They cut the team a bit, but now they don't really have that much money left. And often the companies they raised at the valuation that was much higher than you can do today. Like I'm raising a small round right now for Elo, and we cut the valuation because we raised in 21, and I don't think the valuation today justifies, or the market valuation overall is not the same if you are not pure AI play today. So that is a challenge. Like, we have a lot of companies who are quite small, they are not profitable, and many of them are these verticalized players. And I think we talked about this once, and we kind of mapped together like dozens of different verticals. Every part of your body, every part of care, we have a verticalized companies now, and not one, but often we have 30, like the diabetes. And then the point is that I think the buyers are getting more sophisticated. The employers, the payers, the providers, they're getting more sophisticated, and they don't love the idea of buying from so many different companies. They would love to have a consolidated view and buy from one body. And often, it could be somebody like Optum. Let me buy from them, and I buy all these different things that I need. but I don't want to buy it from 10 different type of small companies that are not around maybe in 2 years, 3 years from now. They're not profitable. So I can't, if I rely on a company that is not profitable and they may have a 18 months of runway, is that a good idea for me if I'm a big player or employer? So that is a challenge. And now I think the question has been that I don't think this is a new field. Like you said, 2009, we started this whole thing. And I was starting Better Doctor 2010, and we were one of the first companies that came into this new fray. So I know almost all the people that you mentioned on the list of who went public, who will go public. They're all friends of mine, and I don't want to say what they say because that's private. But it's been a long haul. Like many times, the founders are still running the companies. I run multiple companies and founded multiple companies at the same time because I happened to sell earlier to private equity, but people are kind of tired, and I think the founders want to go out, they want to get the money, they want to do something else. The investors are, the fund life cycles are 10 years, and many of these companies are now older than 10 years. There hasn't been like a payout to anyone yet. So there's just this inherent need to do something. But the question in my mind is how do we consolidate? And that's why I don't know, maybe the model that General Catalyst has, that VC fund becoming a PE player who can help to consolidate. Maybe that's a good idea, because I don't think me as a CEO, as a founder, like I don't know how to buy companies. It's not inherently something I'm good at. I have never done it before. Now I have done it a few times, but I never had done it in the first time around. And that's not like people talk to each other, but they don't really understand how to do it, many people. So I think we need to have some people who can help the industry and come in. And I think the private equity will likely be now the solution, because the public market, like I said, you have to get to the $500 million revenue, and many companies will never get there on their own.
Really interesting. And so we saw Virgin Pulse, what was acquired Health Comp, renamed itself Personify Health. And I believe there was a private equity fund behind that. So there's this sort of private equity will say, let's do a roll-up in a sector, and then they'll be a sponsor, and you might have CEOs who've not done acquisitions before. There's kind of three types of consolidators, I would say. There's fellow vendors, there's incumbents, and there's big tech. So fellow vendors, that is like Teladoc, which was not that big or not that old, acquiring Livongo. That's being acquired by a fellow vendor. Teladoc happened to be public. Then there's incumbents. So that's like HCA, Hospital Corporation of America, acquiring Patient Keeper, or United Optum acquiring a musculoskeletal company or something like that. And then there's big tech. That's like Google acquiring Fitbit, for example. So those are the three kinds of acquisitions. And it's been slow, and there's a couple of reasons it's slow. One reason is that the young companies were valued too high. They were valued at 20 times forward revenue.
Yep.
And so the other companies are saying, hold on a second, I'm the acquirer, I'm going to be held accountable for how this acquisition goes. And if I pay a very high price, then it will never be accretive to my existing shareholders. And so I'm sort of waiting for that price to fall down. And then others, there's different levels of strength and interest in the marketplace for consolidated solutions. So I'm hearing now that with employer health tech, that's the world of Accolade, Teladoc, Omada, and others, that employers really would love to see consolidated suites. And so that's a strong reason for Virgin Pulse Personify Health is in that market. It's a strong reason to see consolidation. Build out suites inside of Hub, consolidate across multiple hubs. In that, so one health is wellness, another health is care management, another hub is telehealth, another one is mental health, behavioral health, another one is enrollment, another one is consumer-directed benefits. And so there's room for consolidating across products within suites, within hubs, and then across hubs. So Teladoc was was telehealth as a hub, and then it acquired Livongo, which was care management as a hub. So there's a lot driving that. Over in provider tech, which is software and tech companies that sell into large provider organizations, there is a drive for the enterprise buy, the single enterprise buy, but everything is confounded by the success of Epic. Everyone is just how do you relate to Epic? So Epic is sort of confounding what would otherwise be a move by the buyer is the hospital CIO there, and they want to buy a suite. But Epic is so good that companies have to figure out what to do to work around Epic or work with Epic. So those are some interesting areas where we're seeing this, I think.
And I think the challenge also, if you think about the why we are underperforming, because I mean it's like we need to look in the mirror as a cohort or industry. If we think about digital health, because if the market is up, Nasdaq is up 120%, S&P up 90%, Dow is up 50%, whatever, in the last few years, and we are down 60%. Like, how can it be? And then the pharma is even up quite a bit. So we have not, I think, we haven't built great companies, because great company in the end is valued by the profit and the growth, and we have not done that. So many companies are slow growth. They have the challenge of getting profitability. It's incremental value. They don't increase the revenue too much. They don't save the cost. They don't improve the outcomes dramatically. Maybe it's like 10% here and there, and that's not enough for justifying the cost of the service. And many of these companies are built on tech that is not amazing. And I think so. One worry I have that we have this wave, like you said, happening now. We have to consolidate, and maybe it's for some companies it's too late because they don't have a lot of runway. And there are not many companies, like you said, who could become these hubs, who can buy like 10 companies. I don't think Livongo, Amwell, those companies, like, do they have enough, Teladoc, do they have enough capital? I mean, if they're down, the stock is down a lot, the valuation is few billion anymore, you can't really buy and use your stock as a vehicle for the purchase. So that's going to be difficult to do. And I think, selling the market leaders is also hard because Optum won't buy everybody. They will buy few of the best companies, and they can pick and choose, and they have plenty of time to pick and choose. So it's hard. Like, it's easy for you to say that, let's build this hub and spoke model. But when you are in the trench as a CEO, it's bloody hard to navigate. Like, who do you talk to? You can't really admit almost defeat and go talk to other people. Like, you need to have your board members and the investors need to kind of help you to play the game. And they are not always really good at the PE type of game. They are more VC investors. So that maybe the one point that I really think that is important to think here is that none of the companies that we all founded in this market in the last 10 years, none of them are native AI companies. None of them are native, GLP-1 companies, and none of them are native longevity companies, because those are new things that just happened lately. And those are the three areas, I think, today that we all can agree that I think AI will grow, will be dramatic impact. GLP-1s will be $100 billion business in a few years from now. And we're going to have 30 million people taking them. Big change in the whole system. And then I think in a long term, the longevity, what are we going to call it? But the idea that we can extend our life expectancy, lifespan a bit, health span, that will be one of the biggest businesses in the world. But none of those, like, if I'm a VC today, would I invest into the companies who've been around for 10 years today? Or would I invest in the new companies who will build on native AI and tap into these new ideas that are going to be maybe bigger businesses? So that is, I think, a big challenge. Do we have a cohort of or class of companies who will be left out in a way?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and I like that summary of three big things of the future. And I have a talk coming up by a longevity scientist named Gil Blander. He's a co-founder of Inside Tracker, which is You take blood tests and you get a patient portal that allows you to look at. It says things like you're low in iron, or and it's taken by people who want longevity, but also by people who want high performance. And there's this spectrum of issues, like there's wellness and there's healthy living and there's longevity, but there's also performance. What about people who want their hearing to be as good? What about people who want their hearing to be better than normal human hearing? So that there's this, people don't want to lose hearing, but maybe they also like their hearing to be better than normal human hearing. And so there's this spectrum, and Gil summarized it for his future. It's going to be one of my investor events. But he called the spectrum as wellness, performance, and longevity. That's kind of the spectrum. But you're right, we need a word for this, and so. But I like the way you summarized that into three buckets there for us, which was AI, native companies, GLP-1s, and longevity. What do you think? Alyssa Jaffe and Chrissy Farr have put out an interesting thesis. So I know you have a thesis about consolidation, and then Jaffe and Farr have put out a thesis, and they're calling it scale game is their thesis. And what they mean is that ultimately these vendors, they sell products to incumbents, and they also sell themselves. They sell equity to incumbents. And the incumbents are companies like in pharma, there's Lilly, in payers, there's United, in providers, there's HCA. And these companies have grown their size 100% in the last 5 years or so. And they're so big that they almost don't have time to deal with a vendor that comes to them and says, I can help you reduce A1C levels by 1 point. They could deal with a company that has a complete suite of care management solutions, but they can't deal with a company that has one solution. And so they say, therefore, young companies need to consolidate into sort of baskets or suites so that they can be at scale. But so what do you think? Do you agree with that thesis? Add to that.
I think this comes back to, I think, when we talked about what will the new Trump policies of deregulation, maybe change in healthcare, mean into this equation here. Because are we going to go more government paying for healthcare or less? I think that will be a big discussion. If it's less, then I think the big players are getting even bigger. I think I wrote a blog post almost 20 years ago about the fact that big things are getting bigger. The hits are getting bigger. And this was the idea that that year there was a movie that I think like Titanic or some big movie anyway that netted first $1 billion. So maybe it was the James Cameron's Avatar, like a $2 billion movie. There was a video game, Call of Duty, that netted $2 billion. There was a book, maybe one of the Da Vinci Code or something, that was almost like $500 million. So basically you have this sort of there are big things, and there's a long tail. And then if you think about what happened in the last 20 years, now we have the 9 companies, FANG, whatever we call them now. Those companies are valued more than the rest of the stock market combined by twice. And I mean, like I come from like Europe, and of course we have Novo in Europe, but if you think about US, you have Apple is worth more than the stock markets in many countries alone. So the companies are getting so big, and I think in healthcare we would like to see the same thing, that there's going to be just more consolidation if we enable more of the cost to be on a private side. And I mean, it's tough to compete when you negotiate deals with big employers. Like, of course, United is very strong. You're always going to pick them because you almost have to pick them. The Blues are strong. You have to pick them because they are critical in your own area. But what about the small payer? How can you play the game? And then how do you sell as a small company delivering like point solution? How do you even know how to talk to United? They have 300,000 employees. So that is a challenge, I think, that I don't know, maybe we also could use some sort of a marketplace almost. That do we need to consolidate all the companies? Could there be like a real marketplace? I don't know. I mean, that is a very complicated problem that we are facing now.
And then, so, and we're drawing toward the end of the show. So I'm concerned, let me know what you think, that we're going to have consolidation and it continues to be slower than expected. Maybe the aftermath of this election will speed things up, because there might have been a pause on the part of investors to get more certainty regarding the election. Certain macro things will change. If they get more favorable, we could start to see consolidation happen. But I'm concerned, and I'll put it this way, that it will be a buyer's market, that to be an incumbent will be a strong position, and to be a vendor who has great sales relationships, a great sales force, great customers, that's a strong position to be in. To have access to generous funding is a strong position to be in. But then, if we cycle back 5-6 years ago, to have top-notch founding team, it was easy to raise money, to be riding a trend of innovation, to have a top-notch team, to have an exciting product, an innovative product. This is what made a company valuable. And now in a consolidation environment, it's more that it's a buyer's market. So we'd like for big tech to come in and pay irrationally high prices for a lot of digital health companies, but we may find that they come in and they make lowball offers for digital health companies because it's a buyer's market, because there's 8 companies in a small vertical, and they can go and skip over the top 2 and make a lowball bid to the number third market share. And then, so first, when the consolidation wave, which is still slow in coming on, when it finally does come on, it'll be a buyer's market. That's bad news for us innovators. And then also it'll be a game of musical chairs, which means that one consolidator will come in and buy one of the 8 companies, another consolidator will come in and buy another of the 8 companies. But then those who miss, there may be fewer than 8 consolidators, and those who miss out will be stuck. They won't be able to do a sales channel through the incumbents because the incumbents already have their pick. So they start losing options to find sales channels, and it becomes a stronger imperative for them to sell. So is that's what we seem to be looking at? That what it would take is we'd need a boom of innovation. We'd need young companies to grow faster, and we'd need consolidators to have a lot of cash and be desperate to buy, to flip it around and make it be a seller's market. But I don't see that in the cards for the next year. So what do you think about, is it going to be a buyer's market, which is bad news for innovators?
I think you are spot on. You have to get out of the point solution mode. You need to scale and tackle more, bring more value. You have to consolidate. You have to be 1 or 2 in any given vertical, or then you need to sell quickly. If you wait too long, you likely are out of business and nobody will even buy you. And that sucks as a founder. That's not fun. And I mean, many people told me over the years that that's a great advice. Like, if I wake you up 4 in the morning, you need to have a phone number on your phone that you can call somebody who will buy your company tomorrow. It's a great advice, right? But I don't know if I don't have one right now. So it would be great to have that available, because and if you think about that way as a founder, as a CEO, then you're not gonna shut your company down. That's the worst thing that can happen. But then I think there's one point that is maybe a bit contrarian, that I believe in this. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I was in the first startup in late 90s. And I think what we did now, especially in this market, we have done a disfavor for many young first-time founders when we told them, I'm meaning the investors mainly, told people, and also media kind of told them that you need to go and cut burn. We all remember the Sequoia memos and others, and cut burn, try to get to profitability, make more runway. What happened is that we have now a huge number of companies that are these ghost companies who don't barely grow. They are too few people, they can't innovate, they have no money to invest. And this is now locking in brilliant founders who could be building their second or third company now in AI and building something really groundbreaking. Because the point is here, if you are building companies, very rarely your first company will be the company you're going to be known for. It's usually the second or third. And if you get stuck into the first company for more than a decade, and then you have no outcome, then you more likely will go work for Google or Facebook and never try again. So that is a problem that I think investors and this media story about, we need to somehow, become these good companies who are profitable. I mean, startups have never really been profitable. It's about growth, not about being profitable. And I would hope that more companies would just die, and these people who are amazing, they could go and build another company. And I say this to a lot of folks because it is really applying in the healthcare sector the more than anywhere else, because we are the people who built these companies. We care deeply. We have story that, somebody, our life, our family suffered mightily, and we want to build something that make a difference in the world. We are the most passionate people in this market, and we do it for a reason. And if you have that type of reason behind you, then you never want to give up. And sometimes you just need to give up and say, it didn't work. It wasn't about me. It was the market conditions. It was the macro problem and because companies die all the time. But I'm worried that we have too many people stuck now in companies that will go nowhere.
Really interesting. Thank you. I think that does not only apply to the 10 million revenue company that belt tightened. I think it also applies to unicorns. And so with unicorns, they raised their last round at the peak of the valuation cycle, 3 years ago. And now they have a situation, and their private market valuation at the time was $1 billion. And maybe they had a preference stack of $400 million. And now, as measured by comps, their valuation is $300 million. And so the founder's equity and common shares are worth zero in this scenario. And they're looking at it and they're saying, it has to go, it's going to take years for valuation levels to return to where they were. And then the board has to top up shares of founders to give them an incentive. All that has to go right, or I just leave. And meanwhile, my friends are getting big rounds of small companies at high valuations in AI. And yep. I missed the first wave of AI, and I'll miss the second wave of AI if I stick around. And so it's a real dilemma for a surprisingly large number of people. But as you say, digital health founders tend to be passionate and they tend to stick to it. Even someone who's working in technology for corporate communications has no particular interest in sticking with their prior company versus jumping on a new company. But someone who has a family history with diabetes and has a diabetes company, they don't want to leave that IP behind. They don't want to leave their mission behind. They don't want to leave things behind. So very, very interesting observation.
Totally agree.
Well, good. Well, any other topics you want to bring to our audience?
Well, no, I think we had a good discussion that was ranging from quite a few different angles on this. But what a great moment to be alive in a way, because every day feels like there's something new. And I think healthcare is almost the last bastion because we haven't really made healthcare yet to be cloud enabled. We kind of barely got the mobile enabling now that the mobile works. So we don't have a cloud. We don't have the data silos. So that's why the AI is so interesting now, that AI has this big promise, but AI will not work if we don't have the data aggregated. And we don't really have the data aggregations happening yet. So I think that, I think you mentioned earlier that there will be acquirers like Google and Apple, Amazon. Fitbit was acquired by by Google, and Apple has bought some companies and so forth. And Amazon, of course, has bought Whole Foods and One Medical and PillPack and others. So I think the big tech companies will be likely the ones who will show us the way. And I don't know if all of the people like that or not, but they have the money. They have more money than the government has. They have more money than the Optums have. And it's very telling in a way that, like Abbott, for example, I don't think Abbott has the ability to build a watch with the glucose sensor. They don't have the ability to do that. Only Apple and maybe Google have. So I think we're going to see all of these big companies now going more and more into healthcare. And I think we all have heard Cook at Apple talk about this fact that he sees his legacy as building Apple into healthcare. He has said it many times. And I think that's what they're doing. And they're doing it slowly, but every step of the way, Apple Watch becomes more prominent health tool. And I think that is going to be the key piece. We have to be able to monitor our health better with wearable devices and home testing devices. We have to disintermediate the idea we go to lab once a year or every 2 years to get data. It has to happen more frequently. And when that happens, then I think the AI becomes necessity, and we have to change the rules a bit how it works. Because no doctor, like even at Elo today, my data file at Elo, when we take all the data from like all these devices, it's like 4 gigabytes. I drop that data to any doctor today, it will take them a month to understand what it means. And with AI, we can understand real-time basis every day and get coaching from the AI. That already works. So we need to rethink the way of healthcare and go away of this idea that we only fix people when they're broken and start fixing them before they get sick.
Yeah, really interesting. And I have a saying that I give to investors, which is that healthcare is the most information-centric industry.
Yep.
It's also the biggest single industry. There's also no limit to what people will spend on their health. So there's never been a bigger, better industry to be in software and data and AI in. And AI may be the missing link that allows us to do more than we've done in the past. And also, it's the large sector of the economy where there's a saying from Andreessen Horowitz, which is that software is eating the world. So in healthcare, it's the large sector of the economy where software has eaten the least so far, and therefore has the farthest still to go. And and entrepreneurs like the sound of that. They like the sound of that. And there's also, it's intriguing because it's a very large part of the economy, but usually B2B is ahead of it. And so usually you in theory, your product roadmap is done for you by other people. You can look and say, what is AI doing in the enterprise? And then, well, we should have it in healthcare as well. And so some of the risk is de-risked because you can see what's working and what's catching on with consumers and buyers in B2B enterprise, and then bring it into healthcare. So, but you're right, it's one of the most exciting times to be alive in healthcare. So. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ari, for joining us.
Hey, thank you. It was great discussing.
And so you've been listening to Digital Health Investor Talk with Steve Wardell and our guest today, Ari Tulla. We'll be publishing this show as an episode of the Digital Health Investor Talk show. Please subscribe on Apple and Spotify, and don't forget to rate us. We love every 5-star review. Our next event is next week on Tuesday. We have a health innovation night in Boston on November 12th with Jonathan Bush, the CEO of Zeus Health and former CEO of Athena Health, talking about what's in the way of healthcare data interoperability. So thanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.